The magnificent St. Augustine Cathedral shimmered beneath thousands of candles as the city's most powerful families gathered for what everyone called the wedding of the decade. Marble columns, towering stained glass windows, and endless white roses transformed the ancient church into a place of breathtaking beauty. At the front stood Adrian Moretti, the young and feared head of the Moretti crime empire. Although newspapers called him a ruthless mafia boss, only his closest family knew the truth. He had never wanted the criminal life forced upon him after his father's death. Dressed in a perfectly tailored black wedding suit with a white rose pinned to his lapel, Adrian stood silently before the altar, his expression cold and unreadable. His influential uncle, Vittorio Moretti, had arranged the marriage, insisting it would unite two old families and protect their legacy. Adrian had reluctantly agreed, believing love had no place in his life. The cathedral doors slowly opened, and every guest turned toward the bride. Isabella Romano entered wearing a simple, long-sleeved white wedding gown with a delicate veil and modest eyeglasses. Her dark hair was gathered into a neat bun, and instead of looking proud, she kept her eyes lowered as nervous whispers spread through the church. Many of the wealthy guests quietly mocked her appearance, calling her plain, awkward, and unworthy of becoming Mrs. Moretti. Some even whispered that Adrian deserved someone glamorous instead of the shy young woman walking timidly down the aisle. Isabella heard every cruel word but remained silent. Since childhood, she had lived under the protection of
Adrian's uncle after losing both parents,
and she had learned to endure judgment without complaint. She believed Adrian was only marrying her out of family duty and expected nothing more than respect. As she finally reached the altar and gently placed her trembling hand into Adrian's, he looked at her for the first time. Beneath the oversized glasses, nervous expression and quiet smile, he noticed something no one else had cared to see, a kindness and innocence that instantly made the laughter echoing through the cathedral feel painfully cruel. Little did Adrian know, this arranged marriage was about to become the greatest love story of his life. The priest began the ceremony, but the whispers inside the cathedral refused to stop. Elegant guests exchanged mocking glances, convinced that Adrian had sacrificed his future by marrying the quiet girl his uncle had chosen for him. Isabella stood silently beside him, her hands trembling beneath the delicate lace sleeves of her wedding gown. She never looked toward the crowd because she already knew what they thought of her. When the priest asked if anyone objected to the marriage, the cathedral became silent. Suddenly, one wealthy businessman stood and smirked. "Adrian," he said loudly, "you're the most powerful man in this city. Surely you could have chosen someone more beautiful." Laughter spread among several guests. Before Isabella could step back in embarrassment, Adrian slowly turned toward the man. His cold gaze instantly silenced the room. "Beauty," he replied calmly. "You judge a woman you've never spoken to. You see her glasses and her quiet nature, then decide her worth. That says far more about you than it ever will about her." The businessman immediately lowered his eyes. No one dared speak another word. Isabella looked at Adrian in surprise. She had expected indifference from him, never protection. The ceremony continued, and moments later they exchanged vows and rings. As the priest declared them husband and wife, the cathedral filled with polite applause, though many guests still questioned the marriage. While photographers gathered around the newlyweds, Isabella quietly whispered, "You didn't have to defend me." Adrian looked at her with a calm expression. "Maybe not," he answered softly, "but I won't let anyone disrespect my wife." For the first time that day, a small genuine smile appeared on Isabella's face. As they walked hand in hand down the cathedral aisle, Adrian noticed something unexpected. Despite all the cruel comments, Isabella never complained, never argued, and never wished harm on those who had mocked her. Instead, she quietly stopped to help an elderly guest who had accidentally dropped her walking cane before continuing toward the exit. Adrian watched the simple act of kindness in silence. In that single moment, he realized the crowd had spent the entire day searching for beauty on the outside, while the most beautiful person in the cathedral had been standing beside him all along. Little by little, the marriage he had accepted out of duty was beginning to change his heart in ways he never imagined. After the wedding, Adrian brought Isabella to the magnificent Moretti estate, a mansion surrounded by iron gates, marble fountains, and armed security. Every servant lined up to welcome their new mistress, but whispers continued behind closed doors. Some believed the shy young bride would never survive life inside the powerful Moretti family. Isabella greeted every employee with kindness, thanking each person individually instead of acting like the wife of the city's most feared man. She even learned the names of the cooks, gardeners, and housekeepers on her very first day. Adrian watched quietly from a distance. He had grown up in a world where people obeyed because they were afraid. Yet Isabella earned respect simply by treating everyone with dignity. It was something he had never witnessed before. That evening, the Moretti family hosted an extravagant reception attended by politicians, business leaders, and influential families. Expensive crystal chandeliers illuminated the grand ballroom while guests admired the luxurious decorations. Isabella entered wearing a simple ivory evening gown and the same modest glasses, immediately becoming the target of more whispered criticism. One socialite laughed quietly, saying she still looks like a schoolteacher instead of a mafia queen. Isabella heard the comment but simply smiled politely and continued greeting the guests. A few minutes later, an elderly waitress accidentally slipped while carrying a tray of champagne. Glasses shattered across the marble floor, and several guests stepped away in annoyance. Without thinking about her elegant dress, Isabella immediately knelt beside the frightened waitress, helping her gather the broken tray and asking if she had been hurt. The room fell silent. Adrian watched from across the ballroom as his wife comforted the trembling woman while everyone else stood frozen. Walking toward her, Adrian gently offered Isabella his hand and helped her to her feet. Looking around at the silent guests, he spoke with calm confidence. Tonight, many of you admired expensive gowns, jewelry, and power. I admired the woman who didn't hesitate to help someone everyone else ignored. He looked directly at Isabella before adding softly, I thought I married her because it was my uncle's wish. Now I'm beginning to believe it was the best decision of my life. Isabella's cheeks turned red with embarrassment, but for the first time since the wedding, she looked into Adrian's eyes without fear. And although neither of them admitted it aloud, something beautiful had quietly begun to grow between two people who had started their marriage as strangers. As the weeks passed, Adrian found himself looking forward to every quiet moment he spent with Isabella. She never asked about the family's fortune, never questioned his authority, and never tried to change who he was. Instead, she filled the cold Moretti mansion with warmth in simple ways. She organized charity dinners for orphanages, visited elderly residents at local care homes, and quietly paid medical bills for struggling families without telling anyone. The servants, who had once doubted her, now adored her because she treated every person with the same kindness and respect. Adrian watched these small acts from a distance and slowly realized that Isabella possessed a strength far greater than fear or power. She changed people's hearts simply by being herself. One evening, the Moretti family held another grand gala. The same guests who had mocked Isabella at the wedding now watched in amazement as respected businessmen, politicians, and community leaders lined up to thank her for the lives she had quietly changed. Adrian stood at the center of the ballroom, remembering the cruel whispers that had filled the cathedral on their wedding day. Taking Isabella's hand, he raised his glass and addressed the entire room. When I married Isabella, many of you pitied me. You believed I had married the wrong woman because you judged her appearance instead of her heart. He looked lovingly at his wife before continuing. Today I can say with complete certainty that marrying Isabella was the greatest blessing of my life. She taught me that kindness commands more respect than fear, and love is stronger than power. The ballroom erupted into heartfelt applause. Isabella looked at Adrian with tears in her eyes as he gently removed her glasses for a moment and smiled. You were never the ugly girl they called you, he whispered. They simply failed to see the most beautiful woman in the room. Isabella smiled through her tears, and for the first time since their arranged marriage, she embraced him without hesitation. The guests who had once laughed now stood in silence, ashamed of how quickly they had judged her. From that night forward, Adrian was no longer known only as the city's feared mafia boss. Together with Isabella, he became a man remembered for protecting his family, helping his community, and loving the woman everyone else had underestimated. Their arranged marriage had begun with duty, but it ended as a love story that proved true. Beauty is found not in appearance, but in compassion, loyalty, and the courage to love someone for who they truly are.